The creation narrative and the fall. That's again, we continue with the creation and talk a little bit about science. And I want you to be wise and informed when we talk about science and creation, because there's a lot of confusion over that, really, too much confusion, and comes from different mistakes. And today, I don't want to make a detailed explanation of the book of Genesis as a scientific book, but I'm going to give you the points where people get confused, okay? There's points that make everybody gets confused. So let us talk about those points. So the questions we have, the inquiry questions. What does the creation account say to a paleontologist? Who's a paleontologist? What's paleontology? The study of fossils or the beginnings of the earth, the formation of the earth, and it is life. It's not like archaeology. Archaeology is a study of what? Ancient civilization through digging, talking about civilizations. But paleontology, it's about nature. How did it come to be, especially our earth and what's happening on it? What's the meaning of taneen and nakedness? We're going to study these in details. What happened in the fall and what are its consequences? Cain, Abel, and Seth, two genealogies. So we read chapters 3 and 5. And now we're going to start the first part. What does the creation account say to a paleontology? Let's correct some misnotions, some wrong ideas that makes people get confused. Since the early ages of the church, there were ongoing trials to estimate the age of the earth using the genealogy charts of the Bible. People had tried that. We have genealogy charts. Okay? There were also debates on the way God made the creation. How did he make it? Did he make it instantaneously? When he said, let there, something happen immediately, or it took time? And how much time? There were also debates about the way God made the creation. The Bible is the record of history of salvation, and not a science book. We have, especially today, in the age we live in, the age of information and science, we got used to a certain way of reading textbooks and science books and history books. Do we expect the same from the Bible? Should we expect the Bible to talk to us like our science books in school? And the reason why we shouldn't is it because the Bible main concern is not to teach us science. That's not what the Bible is about. But there are textbooks and scientists who wrote textbooks for science, and we look for those for science. We should not expect the Holy Scriptures to answer specific scientific and historic questions, because the Bible is the record of God's relationship with his people, that's the covenants, and is concerned with different set of questions that's different than science. So what are the questions that the Bible is concerned with, that science is not concerned with? And what questions science is concerned with, the Bible is not concerned with. Okay? So you can say this, I can say this to you like this, okay? So I go to a person who works in a factory, and I tell him, you're working over this big machine here that has buttons and handles, all right? And I can ask him, how do you do what you're doing? So he said, I get this piece of metal. Maybe it is a big pistol to make pots and pans. I guess the sheets of metal. I put it under this big, huge arm that comes down, and it goes with a great force, and it pushes that metal sheet into a pan. Then I ask him a second question and say, okay, tell me the mechanics behind this. What this simple workman would say. I don't know. I know this is what I should do, and when I do it, and I do it correctly, safely, I get a pot out of it, but I don't know how it works. You can ask who? The engineer, who knows how to fix it, who knows how it was made. And I go to the engineer and I said, where do you get this big stuff that you made the pistol from? What kind of metal? I said, I don't know. I only know what the mechanics of it and how to fix it, but to make it, you have to go back to the manufacturer. So it seems like for humans, they cannot put everything in one place, otherwise you would expect it to be endless. So the set of questions that we ask the Bible, and the Bible should answer, is usually why and who. Who made the universe? Can I ask the science that question? Would the science answer who made the universe? Absolutely not. Why did he make the universe? Would the science answer that? But what can I ask? Who can I ask? I can ask the Bible that, but who can I ask to give me the how? How does plants use sunlight to make food, to make starch, to make grain leaves, to make fruits? Who would answer this? If I go to the Bible, would the Bible answer this? So how is given to science. Who and why is given to the Bible. So, and then you can actually also ask when for science too. And we're going to have to talk about this a little bit. The scriptures are concerned with the why and who, while science is concerned with when and how questions. The author of the Bible and the creator of the universe is the same. He's the one creator of heaven and earth. Therefore, there should be no conflict between the Bible and ongoing true scientific discoveries. Sometimes, and this is happening more and more, atheists go into science to answer a question that they cannot answer. But they make it believable that this is true. So they say, we discovered evolution. There's no God. How did you know that? We discovered that things come from each other. Species develop and become more species, and because of speciation, to make more species. And because of speciation, we can tell you for sure there is no God. Is this the true conclusion? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And I'm going to tell you the argument for that. I'm just going to go quickly. We're not in a debate here over. I'm just trying to tell you how people look at the account of Genesis, and we need to know that. So if the same author who wrote the Bible is the one who made the universe, there should be any conflict between the two? If I'm the one who made the car, and someone came to study the car, and I wrote you a catalog of it, is there going to be any conflict between the catalog, the hand manual of the car, and the car itself? If somebody looks at the car and find the manual is not matching, he's going to complain and say, you're writing a manual for some other car. So if God wrote the Bible, and the Bible is not the manual of the universe, it's a manual of me. It's a manual about me in relationship to God. It's not about the universe. There should be no conflict. It's a side point. But therefore, we should not expect them to answer questions that should be answered by sincere scientific studies. The Bible should not answer those questions. I'm talking about also the fathers of the church. The fathers of the church, some people would say, did they say anything about the Genesis account? The fathers of the church from the first centuries did not have the scientific discoveries we had today. St. Augustine many times said, I don't know. We should not making jumps into conclusions. So you don't really depend on the fathers of the church to answer scientific questions. I can't expect them. If the Bible didn't talk about it, why should I think the fathers of the church would talk about it? Do you understand what I'm saying? So neither the Bible nor the fathers are science. Science is looking at God through his work. And it comes with limitations. And those limitations has to be respected. Now, regarding the creation narrative, many different approaches has been taken. So when you look at Christians, and especially in this country and in England especially, you would have those following. And I'm going to ask about those ones. Be careful now, because those people might be, the first set is the Christian group, the Christian and the Jews. Regarding the creation narrative, many different approaches had been taken. You can group them into two groups, the theistic and the atheistic. We talked about theistic. What's theism? What's atheism? A is negation. So from the creation narrative, people can say, I believe in God, and I believe that he is the creator of everything. And the other group would say, I don't believe in God, I believe that he doesn't exist, and I look at everything that exists as spontaneous, came by itself. We don't have to have a God or a superpower or any. Atheistic means he doesn't believe in anything supernatural that made the creation. Had to come by spontaneous generation. You understand what I'm saying? So these are the two main groups. When you go back to the theistic, the one who believe in God, it gets a little bit complicated. Just listen to this and understand what I'm saying. There's old earth group, there is a young earth group, and there is a gap theory group 3. Old earth, young earth, and a gap theory. The 3 groups. What does the old earth say? They take the approach that a day is not a 24-hour. It's an age of many, maybe millions of years. I think, and the church doesn't have a very dogmatic stand on this, but we, since Pope Shenouda is the first one who talked about this, we are of the type that says we think it is as age. The day is an age. I'm going to give you as a reason why that's the case. But many fundamentalists in this country take the very hard approach of saying it was a 24-hour days, and they refuse any other way. So this is, we are old earth, and they are young earth. So if it is only 1 week of 24 hours each day, you would finish creation in a week of days, and then start the genealogy of Adam. So the earth is actually, to them, is how old? If you count the genealogies, there is a little bit discrepancy between the Septuagint and the Masoretic. The Masoretic puts it a little younger even, but the Septuagint would say at least 5,500 years between the creation and Christ. So the earth actually is 5,500 years. The old earth would say absolutely not. That doesn't make sense. So they take the 24-hour day approach, but the old earth take it a day age approach. Each day represents a long period of time. The old earth, they can divide again. They say, and God used evolution to do it. There is no really hard proof of that. There's no hard evidence. We don't follow that. That evolution is the way that God did things over long periods of time. We would have to say how this could happen over time. I'm going to tell you the arguments against it again. So the evolutionary theistic old earth would say God created using evolution as a process. It doesn't necessarily has to be wrong from the principal point of view, because let us say your car is a Honda, and this ar was made in an assembly line in Ohio, usually. Went through the machines. Every machine did a little part, and then in the end they assemble it together. There's another guy down the road, he does it by hand. He gets the pieces, and he hammers them, and he does all the work by hand, like Rolls-Royce. Okay, this is Honda, and this is Honda. Does it matter which way it was made by? At the end you would have, and it has a person who made it. You get that? As long as evolution is used as a process and not a God. God is the creator. Either evolution is used or it's not used. He used evolution, okay. He didn't use evolution, it's okay. We're open. If science said today everything came up, and there is a little language in the first chapter that says, and God said, let the sea produce. What does that mean? Let the sea produce means he gives vitality to the sea to start making things. If there is an evolutionary process in that, fine. The special creation insists that everything God had made by itself, when they insist on or they highlight the words according to its kind, means God has in mind kinds, species, and he created everything in his kind. We don't have a hard scientific answer or a theological answer for those. It's left, and maybe God will reveal to us sometime how did he do these things. But for sure, when it came to human, he didn't do that. Because when he came to human, he said what? Let us make man in our image. He didn't say let the earth produce humans. There was an interference by God himself. He took it personally to make man, and he made man from the clay. So there is a specific hint. So when somebody says to me, we came from apes, I say, no, that doesn't fit the Bible. You can tell me apes came from Protozoa, that's fine. But to tell me humans came from another animal, this was actually intentionally put as God intending to make man from clay. And the evolutionary would argue again and say, clay through a lizard, clay through an ostrich. Our ancestors were plants, clay through the plants. That's too much stretching it. Again, the church doesn't have any hard position on these things, so don't go arguing to death against it. We know for sure that God created everything. That is the statement that has to be. Any explanation that excludes God is against the church. Got it? Okay. The young earth, and I told about the young earth, they approach. The gap theory is interesting. They said, okay, wait a second. We can reconcile the two. God actually made it in a week, but between the first day and the second day, there was a gap. So he made a creation, and this creation was annihilated on the second night, before the second day comes. And he started over in the second day. So they said, there's two creations with a long gap in between. So there's billions of years before the first creation and second creation. And this adds the two together. So God really created the whole thing in 7 days, 24 hours. But between the first day and second day, there is a lot of time. So you can take the two together and make them into one theory. Inserts a long time period between the first and the second verses of the first chapter of Genesis. Not the first day and second day, between the first verse and the second verse. So they don't confuse you, because it says, in the beginning, God created heaven and earth. And then he said, and the earth was taho baho. And then he said, let there be light. So he's starting over. I say, again, that's assuming that the narrative is repeating itself. That's not the case. We don't believe that. The church did not make a dogmatic statement on the subject of the age of the earth, nor on the specific process of creating different species, except that the explanation should affirm and is compatible with God as the creator. When evolutionary explanation excludes the creator, then it contradicts the first statement of the creed and the account of Genesis. Okay? If God wanted to use evolution as a method to do it, it's fine. The young earth people who was very hard-headed about it said, no, evolution excludes God. It doesn't have to. It doesn't have to. One added piece of information, there's something called macroevolution. Is species turning into another species. Invertebrate becomes vertebrate. Sea creatures becomes amphibian. Amphibian becomes land animals. So these hierarchical shifts or jumps in the creation is called macroevolution. But there is microevolution. You always hear about the giraffe, how the giraffe necks were very short, and then as the sources of the giraffe became scarce, they started to only the long-necked giraffe to survive, and they mate together, they make longer and longer necks until eventually you have that giraffe with a long neck. That's fine. It's okay. They call that microevolution. The giraffe did not come from a rabbit. That's fine. That's called microevolution. Evolution within the species. We don't have any problem with microevolution. Macroevolution, it's still questionable. They try very hard to prove it, but there's no set of proofs. Of course, the atheistic person is jumping on it and say, yes, we have proofs. If you study biology, and I hope you did, and you study the details of biology, cell biology, and DNA and all that stuff, you will come to be having a hard time accepting this. Because the amount of details that happens in the human body, for each one step to take an evolutionary jump, it means infinite amount of years. All the people who studied medicine, if they think about it for a second and they know exactly what they have read and what they have studied, and it took them like 4 or 5 years to finish, they know. They know it is really hard. I'm not saying this is a dogma. I'm just telling you my opinion. If I go and study all the tissues of the body and all the organs and all the organ systems and all the complicated stuff that happens in a one cell, one of the things that blows my mind, after the cell divides, when the single cell divides, it goes into a self-examination process they call checkpoint. What happens in the checkpoint? It checks its own DNA and organelles. And if the cell finds a big fault with it, what happens? The cell commits suicide. Just think about that. Just think about, this is not evolutionary, by the way. There is no selection here. There's no an outside danger that pushes that cell to die. The cell dies from within. This is crazy. And it deploys all its enzymes and everything that the cell has to break down its own guts and give itself to another cell to use. Just think about that. That's one, I'm just talking about one single piece of information. I didn't give you the whole rest of it. About DNA and how it actually transcribes itself into a messenger RNA, then that messenger RNA goes outside the nucleus to go and be translated. There is a code. So the material of life is written before it is actually expressed. So there is a lot going on that evolution cannot explain. How many years we have for that? They said, since dinosaur extinction, 65 million years. So when did the monkeys appear that we are supposed to be part of our ancestry? Way after that. Okay. Okay, let's go and study the atheistic and said spontaneous appearance of the universe and life. Natural selection of similar mechanisms is responsible for the appearance of life and new species. When they discovered DNA, Watson and Crick model, they said, oh, we think it has to be the mutations and crossbreeding. It's not natural selection anymore, because natural selection is a pressure from outside. How can you press something to change its DNA? Survival, yes, it's going to have to be one mutation. How many mutations happen in a whole generation? And how many mutations are good? Anyway, I'm just talking too much science and I will need to cut it so we can focus on the Bible.